In this video, folks, we're going to answer the question on the lips of so many 35mm shooters. Should you consider upgrading to medium format? Is there really a significant image quality over a high quality full frame mirrorless camera in 2022? Do you get a medium format look? And is it worth the extra money? We're going to be shooting with model Felicia in studio, as well as a couple of different locations out on the street. So let's get to it. Demonstrating really the dynamic range that the Hasselblad X2D is capable of. Now, of course, dynamic range is just one of many image quality factors that we use to determine the quality of a sensor and the overall imaging system. But if you're correctly exposing your images, it may be something that you don't really face too often. So I wanted to do something a little bit more comprehensive and compare the overall image quality to this guy. This is the Nikon Z7 II. And whilst there's a significant difference in price between these guys, and the Z7 is a full frame and this is a crop medium format, there is, I think, a reasonable reason to compare them. The Z7 II is actually a few years old now, but it's still rated as equal first amongst 35mm sensors, according to DxO at least, along with the brand new Leica M11 and a couple of others. And the original generation of this, the X1D50, is rated as the top they've ever tested at 102 points versus 100 points on this one. So comparing the new generation, I think, is quite fair. Another thing that I'm hoping we can draw out in this video is the kind of myth or misunderstanding of the medium format look that people talk about. There's often this mysterious thing that people talk about, that they want to go into medium format because they want to get that look. They want to get the medium format look and feel. Now, part of it is just kind of a perspective thing, having the reverse crop factor, but what people really are talking about is the shallower depth of field. Now, this being a 55mm f2.5, it roughly translates to, with the 0.79 crop factor, to about 44mm, about f2. You get that much closer because of the crop factor to equalize the frame. That means your depth of field gets shallower. There you go. But we have things like 50mm f1.2 that's going to give you a far shallower depth of field. So I thought putting these side by side, taking some comparable shots in studio and on the street, can give you an idea if this is really something that you should consider. And I'm going to give you sample files for all of this. There'll be a link to that in the description below. And if you're shooting Nikon, you probably know I've made an expert setup guide that runs you through the entire system. I've now made one for the Hasselblad X2D as well. Links to both of those are below. The new one runs you through this camera's physical controls, an initial setup, everything you'll want to customize, a full deep dive on every single menu item, as well as showing you practical tips on how to get the most out of the camera for your style of shooting. Let's head out and take a look at these guys, see the kind of images they're able to create. So when people talk about the medium format look, they're often talking about the shallower depths of field you get. Here on a 50mm lens at f2.5, base ISO, we get something comparable to this. This is of course a 55mm, but if I go to kind of recreate the frame I had on her, because this has a reverse crop factor, it becomes like a 45, I end up coming in that much closer. And then at this closer distance, my f2.5 gives a shallower depth of field. That's just because one of the variables of your depth of field is your distance to the subject. And I think it's something that people with their rose-colored glasses who really want to upgrade to medium format, and I'm not meaning to have a go at you, I'm one of you, sometimes overlook. Whilst yes, on the same equivalent you can get a shallower depth of field, there's just much faster lens options for 35mm. So I can be further back, use my 50mm lens here, but then I can stop all the way down to f1.2 and I can get a far shallower depth of field than is going to be possible from any medium format native glass. Just no one makes something that's an equivalent that fast. About the fastest I can think of is the Fuji 80 1.7 that with the crop factor becomes about a 1.4. Yes, you can get adapted lenses and then you're going to get the potential to get really fast apertures like adapter 1.4 and it's going to become something like a 1.1, but then you're going into manual focus territory and it's no longer really a direct system comparison. Man, this might be finally the shoot after spending the past 10 days with the Hasselblad that convinces me not to get it. Reminding myself how great the Z7 II and this 50mm are to shoot with, the results I'm getting, and it is nice to have eye tracking autofocus, and Hasselblad haven't committed to it. There is honestly, as much as I was making fun of it in my review, something to be said for slowing down and being methodical in your work, but there's also something to be said for getting it done without having to spend 5 seconds to take each photo. And to have a screen that tilts down so you can do shots like this more easily. Okay folks, so we've got those different shoots in here now. I have gone through and tried to equalize the white balance. When I did the Fuji versus Hasselblad video, the Hasselblad seems to have better white balance auto modes that were making things look better, but I wanted to make sure here so that you know, for those of you who don't download the sample files, you can still see what they're getting if I equalize the white balance. So let's just jump in here. I should note that Hasselblad focus, you get better results on the Hasselblad files, but I'm not using Nikon software either, so Lightroom's kind of a well-known in between. So let's take a look here, first of all, at the shot along the wall. So this is a shot taken at f2.5, 2.5. Now, we compare them. Whenever you see the one that's a bit more square, that's the Hasselblad file because it has the different aspect ratio. So I have equalized these. They're both at f2.5. I mean, equalized the white balance and the exposure. But you can see still the Hasselblad has come out warmer, even though they're both set at exactly the same white balance. Looking at the blur and everything, it's not too different. The thing is when we zoom in, now I've actually gone in and already chosen what are, you know, really great samples. There was still, of course, some that were slightly less sharp than others in my series, so I'm trying to get the best from both to share with you. It's a little hard to compare when you've got, you know, 100 megapixels versus 50 because we're that much closer, but you can see the skin tones, you can see the skin detail, and out here on the street, I think even if you took the magnification out of it, look, it's kind of, I feel like I'm selling ice to an Eskimo here. Honestly, the Z7 II and the 50mm are an amazing combo, and you're getting so much detail there that on a lesser camera you just wouldn't get. But on the Hasselblad there is just that much more again. Now, I got a couple of different variations here just to show you that, remind you, whilst yes, the Hasselblad, you get to get that much closer because of the wider frame of view. With the full frame, I have a 1.2 option. So here, taking a look at the blurred out background, how much softer it is using the 1.2. It's not a huge amount, but if you have a messy background, that is helpful. And again, with the foreground, that's probably better in this case. The foreground was kind of nasty, so having the 1.2 helps you blur that more. One trade-off you have to think about though is shooting wide open at 1.2, you're not going to get it nearly as sharp as it was at 2.5 because on the 1.2 you've stopped down a fair bit. So this is now the Hasselblad shooting wide open versus the Nikon shooting wide open, and here the detail difference is really quite stark. Moving on to the stairs, let's have a look at the two shots at f2.5. Again, you can tell which is which. The Hasselblad is still slightly warmer and has that square crop factor. Having a look at the blurred out area on the stairs, actually, the Hasselblad here, when they're both at f2.5, is obviously softer. We're going to cover that in just a second. But taking a look at our subject, again, you know, when the subject isn't that big in frame, you're not seeing super detail. Even at 100%, we're not like just on an eyeball. They're both performing really well. I do think to the eye that the Hasselblad is a more pleasing image and it definitely has more detail, but they're both perfectly acceptable and great. The thing is, if we go to f2, which, you know, once we've gone in closer with the Hasselblad, it becomes about an f2, so that's a more reasonable comparison. Then on the Nikon, the blurred out background gets closer, probably still not as soft as the Hasselblad, but we're getting, you know, a third of a stop more light in on the Nikon. And of course, on the Nikon, we also have the option of going into f1.2, and there you are going to see significantly softer backgrounds on it. But again, with the trade-off of not having nearly the same kind of detail, sharpness, contrast from shooting wide open. Let's take a look at the studio shots next, because for a lot of people, even though the Hasselblad is now definitely a field camera with the stabilization and everything, in studios where you're going to really notice the biggest difference, I would imagine. Having a look at the Nikon and the Hasselblad, let's go. So let's go first in on the Nikon, so we're really paying attention to the eye there. I mean, that's a fantastic amount of detail, both of these at f2.5. When we move it around to focus in on the Hasselblad, it's just, again, it's just that much more. And look at the difference actually in the eyebrow. Every hair perfectly defined on the Hasselblad, whereas it's already kind of starting to get a little bit wispy and gray. There isn't the same contrast on the Nikon. I think it's worth pointing out or reminding you that this is shooting stopped down almost 2 stops, or 2 stops on the Nikon, but shooting wide open on the Hasselblad is actually kind of surprising that there's this much of a difference. Going in on kind of a mid shot. Whilst we let the Hasselblad load. Again, I mean, we're so close, we're getting such a fine depth of field, but we've got the focus right there on the eyelashes. And here on the Hasselblad, I'm just repeating myself at this point, it's all the same. It's great on the Nikon, but it's just ridiculous on the Hasselblad. I feel like a broken record at this point. And then going in on the full length shot here, this time with, again, the Hasselblad on the right. Yeah, look, I'm just repeating myself again. It's excellent on the Nikon, but exceptional on the Hasselblad. It's really like the Z7 is fantastic, amazing, everything you could want, and then the Hasselblad is just that next level above. I have to still keep in mind though, the experience of shooting with the Hasselblad at launch not having continuous autofocus at all or eye detect, the shooting process in most of the outdoor situations was noticeably slower and at times a little bit frustrating, whereas the Z7 that doesn't have the world's best eye autofocus, it was just easy. It would stay with her. I would say the number of shots that were perfectly sharp were about the same between the two cameras. If you're a little bit slow and methodical, then the Hasselblad's going to work fine for you. If you're in studio, it's going to work fine for you, especially with careful poses. But if your model's moving around and you have to keep moving your point around to stay on their face, the Hasselblad, that's an obvious negative. But I need to cycle back. I need to clearly address this question. For 35mm shooters, is there really an advantage of shooting with medium format? I can say at the moment, if you look at the best sensors in 35mm and the best sensors in medium format, yes, there is a difference. You're shooting 16-bit RAWs on the medium formats and you have that extra dynamic range, and I'm pretty confident that once we see the sensor tests, that the color and tonal range of the sensors is going to come out ahead too. That's been my experience shooting with them. Is it worth the extra money? I'm sorry, I don't want to cop out on the title of the video, but that really comes down to you. I can't tell you if an $8,000 camera is worth it over a $3,000 camera. For some people, $5,000 is all the money in the world, and for others, it's pocket change. So that's a question you're going to have to answer for yourself. But yes, there is a noticeable difference. However, you do have the option of much faster autofocus on 35mm and much faster aperture lenses, and just a bigger range of native lenses as well. If you haven't seen it, we're doing some adapted lens testing on medium format, so to show you there are options there as well, but they're not native, they're not all going to give you autofocus, and they're not necessarily going to give you the same kind of performance you would get from native lenses. So let me know, are you an APS-C shooter contemplating 35mm? Are you a 35mm shooter contemplating medium format? And where are you standing? What's the trade-off that you're faced with, and which way are you falling on the decision? Please do check out the 5-day deal. It's live right now, as I said, and that ends on October 18th. Help us support these great charities. Grab yourself a bargain. Make sure you use my link for that bonus start to finish body paint shoot. I'll see you guys soon.